All right, so we're back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Oh, and before I forget, a quick shout out to our sponsor. You Talk, We Listen is brought to you by the OtisWho Network, based right here in St. Louis. And today we're going to be looking at something that I think a lot of people can relate to, but maybe don't like to talk about too much.
Oh, intrigue me.
We are going to be dissecting an online feud.
Ooh, juicy.
And this is, obviously online feuds are a dime a dozen.
Right.
But this particular one, I think, brings up some really interesting questions about like power dynamics and gender and Black identity, all kinds of really interesting stuff.
All in the digital age.
Yeah, exactly. So our source material for this is a transcript from a live stream. There's this show hosted by someone named Sharon.
Okay.
And they have frequent guests like May and PH Diva.
Mm.
And it's kind of like a, online forum or whatever, but it's live, right? So it's got all that raw energy.
Ooh, that live energy. Yeah, there's something about being live.
Yeah.
It definitely changes things.
No, absolutely. And in this particular episode that we're going to be looking at, things go seriously off the rails when a guest named Real Prism enters the chat.
Okay. I can already see the drama unfolding.
So Real Prism does not waste any time
Uh-oh.
before launching into an attack.
Oh, my.
First, they accuse another participant, Big J,
Okay.
of spreading lies about women.
Okay.
And then they immediately pivot to May and call her, and I'm quoting directly from the transcript here, a dusty old.
Yeah.
Let's just say it's a very derogatory term.
So already we see, like, this is a deliberate provocation.
Oh, yeah.
And it immediately, like, sets a tone for the entire exchange. And what's interesting to me is that they choose to attack May using ageist and sexist language.
Right.
Even though the initial accusation was about Big J spreading lies about women.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of suggests that there's this deeper personal animosity at play here.
Yeah, definitely. So we've clearly got a feud brewing here.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly is Real Prism's issue with May?
Well, she throws a lot of accusations out there.
Okay.
She claims May is controlling, manipulative,
Mm-hmm.
even accuses her of doxing other creators, which is a serious allegation.
Yeah. For those who aren't familiar, doxing is when you reveal someone's personal information online, like their address or phone number, usually with the intent to harass or intimidate them.
Right. It can be incredibly dangerous and put people at risk of real-world harm.
Absolutely. So this is escalating quickly. How does May respond?
She vehemently denies everything, calling Real Prism a keyboard warrior with a vendetta.
Okay.
May insists that she's actually an activist fighting oppression, calling out hypocrisy, especially among men who, claim to support Black women,
Right.
but then tear them down behind the scenes.
Okay, so that's a pretty powerful defense, positioning herself as a fighter for justice. But does Real Prism just back down at that point?
No, she doesn't back down. She keeps going, keeps hammering on this idea that May is a hypocrite.
Okay.
And she brings up May's alleged involvement with, quote, manosphere figures.
Oh, interesting. So for people who might not be familiar with this term, manosphere, can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, so manosphere refers to this kind of loose network of online communities that often promote very traditional gender roles
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes express misogynistic views. The term itself is controversial. Some people see it as a really dangerous breeding ground for, sexism and even hate speech.
Yeah.
But then others will argue that it simply reflects, a diversity of opinions on masculinity and gender relations.
Right. It's a complicated thing for sure.
Yeah.
But so essentially what Real Prism is trying to do here is discredit May
Yes.
by associating her with this group. It's a classic guilt by association tactic.
Exactly.
But is there any evidence to support these claims? Or is this just like, mudslinging?
That's where things get murky because we are dealing with online personas, right?
Yeah.
Curated versions of ourselves that we present to the world. And it's hard to know, especially in a heated exchange like this, what's real, what's fabricated.
Yeah, totally. So we've got these two women going head to head, each accusing the other of hypocrisy and manipulation. On the surface, it sounds like a pretty classic online feud.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned earlier that this live stream in particular reveals something deeper about Black identity.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
Well, it's not just about these two individuals. It's about the other participants in the live stream. they get pulled into this conflict, and their contributions start to reveal these interesting tensions within the Black community
Okay.
about the best way to navigate, societal power structures.
I see. I see. So it's kind of like it starts as this very personal thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it sort of opens up into this broader conversation
Exactly.
about like how to exist, how to be
Exactly.
in a world that isn't always, welcoming.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah. So there's a participant named Uncle Tom,
Okay.
and he argues that Black people should adopt, quote, the mindset of a white man to avoid being perceived as a threat. Now, obviously, the term Uncle Tom itself carries a lot of baggage.
Yeah, for sure.
It's often used to criticize Black people who are seen as overly subservient to white authority.
Right.
So it's already a provocative statement to begin with.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And it just highlights this tension between different approaches to Black empowerment.
Yeah, so you have, on the one hand, you've got Real Prism, who is, very confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
They're calling out oppression. They're not, backing down from a fight.
Right, a very direct approach.
Exactly. And then you have Uncle Tom, who's suggesting a more, I don't know, strategic, almost like assimilationist approach.
Right, like how do you work within the system?
Exactly. So that's obviously going to create some tension.
Oh, absolutely. And it sparks a lot of debate in the chat.
I bet. So are there other people in the chat who kind of agree with him? Or is he kind of like a lone wolf in this?
Well, not necessarily agree, but there are definitely different viewpoints that emerge on how Black individuals should kind of navigate this society that can often be, hostile or discriminatory.
Right.
So, some argue for a more assertive approach, like calling out racism, demanding justice. Others might emphasize individual responsibility, self-reliance.
Okay.
And then, still others advocate for working within the system to kind of create change from within.
Right. And so all these different ideologies are kind of playing out
Yes.
in real time. That's fascinating.
It is. It is.
And I imagine, it can get pretty heated.
Oh, absolutely. Because these are deeply held beliefs and, people are passionate about these issues. And when you're in a live setting, there's that immediacy. There's no time to kind of, step back and reflect.
Right, exactly. It's just raw emotion.
Raw emotion.
Yeah.
It's not just about navigating these external forces either. This live stream also kind of exposes the internal conflicts and power struggles within the Black community as well.
You're talking about the constant questioning of motives and accusations of fakeness.
Exactly.
Okay.
Keep popping up.
It seems like everyone is suspicious of everyone else's intentions.
Yeah.
Real Prism, in particular, is just relentless in her attacks on May,
Right.
accusing her of being, this puppet master pulling strings behind the scenes,
Yeah.
trying to get other creators' channels taken down.
There was that whole thing about Cammie Samuels,
Yes.
who Real Prism claims that May tried to sabotage.
Right. And she brings up this guy named Keeping 100,
Okay.
who supposedly has some inside knowledge about May's, alleged double dealings.
Okay.
He's described as a manosphere figure, and he previously exposed May's attempts to kind of infiltrate and manipulate these groups.
Oh, wow.
So it's like Real Prism is trying to build this case against May,
I see.
presenting this, quote-unquote evidence
Yeah.
to support her claims of, hypocrisy and manipulation.
It's hard to know what to make of all this.
Is Real Prism like a truth teller,
Right.
exposing the, the dark underbelly of the online world,
Mm-hmm.
or is she just like a drama queen,
Right.
stirring up trouble?
It's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it gets to the heart of what we were talking about earlier about this performative nature of online interactions. Are these participants truly invested in these arguments, or are they simply playing to their audience?
Well, and they are on a live stream, right?
Exactly.
So there is this awareness of being watched.
Mm-hmm.
There's this sense that they need to keep the audience engaged,
Absolutely.
keep them entertained.
And that awareness inevitably influences how people behave.
Right.
The arguments they make,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So as viewers, as listeners, how do we even begin to try to decipher
Right.
what's real and what's performance?
It's tricky. There's no easy answer. But I think it's important to approach these kinds of online exchanges with a healthy dose of skepticism. Ask yourself, like, who benefits from this conflict?
Okay.
What are the underlying motivations?
Mm.
And are the arguments being presented logically and fairly? Or are they just riddled with, like, fallacies and personal attacks?
So critical thinking is key.
Yes,
We can't just accept everything we see and hear online at face value.
absolutely. And remember, the loudest voices aren't always the most truthful or insightful.
Oh, that's a good point.
Sometimes the most valuable perspectives are the ones that are, more nuanced and measured.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of nuanced perspectives,
Yes.
there was a point in the live stream where the conversation kind of shifted away from the personal drama
Mm-hmm.
between May and Real Prism, and it delved into this really interesting debate about DEI initiatives.
Ah, yes. That was a fascinating exchange.
Yeah.
Real Prism was vehemently opposed to DEI,
Okay.
calling it socialism,
Wow.
and arguing that it forces, unqualified people into important positions.
All right.
She seemed to believe that these programs basically undermine meritocracy
Okay.
and ultimately harm Black people by creating this perception of, unearned advancement.
It's a perspective you hear sometimes, but I thought PhD Diva did a really great job of pushing back on that narrative.
Yes, PhD Diva's contribution was crucial
Yeah.
because she didn't just dismiss Real Prism's concerns.
Right.
She actually took the time to explain the mechanics of DEI,
Yeah.
like how these programs actually work to address systemic biases
Right.
without sacrificing, quality or competence.
Yeah, it was like she was giving a master class
Yes,
in DEI
Exactly.
for anyone who might have been, confused or misinformed about the topic.
Absolutely.
It's just a shame that that conversation often gets bogged down in these simplistic arguments,
Right.
when in reality, DEI is this, complex and multifaceted issue.
Yes.
And its effectiveness really depends on thoughtful implementation
Mm-hmm.
and a genuine commitment to fostering inclusion.
It's not just checking boxes.
Right, exactly. It's about real systemic change. And I think this exchange also kind of highlights this tension that we see a lot
Yes.
between individual agency and these structural barriers that
Yeah.
exist,
Mm.
right? So, Real Prism seemed to believe that Black people should focus on self-reliance
Okay.
and pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, so to speak.
Mhm.
Whereas PhD Diva and others were emphasizing the need for structural changes
Yes.
to address the systemic racism and discrimination that create these obstacles that can't be overcome through sheer willpower alone.
Absolutely.
It's a debate that's been going on for generations, right?
Mhm.
Individual responsibility versus collective action.
Yeah, where do we draw the line?
Exactly. And this live stream kind of captures that tension really beautifully.
It does. You have these different perspectives within the Black community,
Yeah.
each with its own valid points. There's
Yeah.
no one-size-fits-all approach to empowerment.
And then, on top of all of this,
Yeah.
we've got this whole other layer of conflict around gender dynamics.
Yes. The tension between men and women kind of simmers just below the surface
Right.
throughout this whole live stream.
We see it in the way that Real Prism and May talk about each other, accusing each other of manipulation, control.
Right.
And then you've got the male participants kind of chiming in with their own judgments about female behavior,
Mm-hmm.
using terms like simp and pick me.
Yes. Very loaded terms.
Just like a whole other battle is being waged alongside the main feud.
It's a reminder that these online conflicts are rarely about just one thing.
Yeah.
It's about all of these different layers of identity,
Mhm.
race, gender, ideology.
Yeah.
They're constantly intersecting and influencing the way people interact.
And these platforms, with their anonymity and their potential for virality, it seems like they often amplify those conflicts.
Yeah.
Right. Creating a space where these personal grievances can escalate into these public spectacles of drama and outrage. It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder if these platforms are even conducive to having productive dialogue,
Right.
or if they just incentivize the most extreme and outrageous behavior.
That's the dilemma, right?
Yeah.
On the one hand, these platforms give a voice to people who might otherwise be marginalized or silenced.
Right.
They allow for a level of unfiltered expression that you just don't often see in, traditional media.
Right.
But on the other hand, that same unfiltered nature can lead to a very toxic environment
Yeah.
where, personal attacks and inflammatory rhetoric kind of drown out any possibility of meaningful discussion.
And in this particular live stream, we see that toxicity playing out, specifically in the way the gender dynamics are discussed.
Absolutely.
Right.
There's this one moment where the conversation turns to whether or not May is a dyster.
Right. And for those who aren't familiar with that term,
Right.
it's basically a derogatory label that's used to describe black women who date or marry outside of their race. It's a deeply offensive term that's rooted in this idea that black women who choose partners outside of the black community are somehow betraying their race.
Right. It's a reminder of the double standards that black women often face.
Yeah.
The way that their choices are scrutinized and judged both from within and outside their community.
And it highlights how, like, race and gender and sexuality
Yes.
can all be used to marginalize and control individuals.
Absolutely. It's intersectionality of oppression at its finest.
Yeah. In this case, May's romantic choices are being weaponized against her as if they somehow invalidate
Right.
her arguments about black empowerment or gender equality.
It's a way to discredit her,
Right.
to undermine her message.
Yeah. It's disheartening to see how quickly these conversations can devolve into these, like, very personal attacks. It makes you wonder if genuine dialogue is even possible in these online spaces.
It's a valid concern, but I wouldn't say that all hope is lost.
Ever.
Even in this chaotic live stream, we see glimpses of, like, productive exchange. Remember PH Diva's explanation of DEI?
Mm-hmm.
That was a moment where someone actually took the time to, like, educate and inform,
Yeah.
to challenge misconceptions and provide a nuanced perspective.
You're right. And despite all the drama and the personal attacks, there were moments where the participants actually engaged with each other's arguments, pushed back on ideas, offered alternative perspectives.
Exactly. And those moments, however fleeting they may be, are a reminder that even in the most toxic online environments, there's still a possibility for growth and understanding.
Okay.
It's just a matter of finding ways to amplify those voices and create spaces where, like, respectful dialogue can actually flourish.
So what are our takeaways then from this deep dive into the world of online feuds?
Ooh, big question.
It's been a wild ride.
It has.
And honestly, like, a little bit exhausting.
Yeah, it's been intense. But I think there's a lot to learn from observing these interactions, even the most, like, dysfunctional ones. First, it's crucial to remember that online personas are just that. Personas. They're curated versions of ourselves, often, like, amplified for an audience.
Right.
We need to approach online content with a critical eye, understanding that there's always more to the story than what's being presented on the surface.
And we need to be aware of, like, the power dynamics at play.
Yes.
How anonymity and virality can, like, really distort conversations.
Absolutely.
And incentivize this, like, extreme behavior.
Yeah. We need to be mindful of the language that we use.
Right.
And the impact our words can have on others.
For sure.
Online platforms can be powerful tools for connection, for communication.
Yeah.
But they can also be weaponized to harm and divide.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we navigate these online spaces, we need to be, vigilant, discerning, and always willing to, like, challenge our own assumptions.
Beautifully put. And perhaps most importantly, we should never lose sight of the fact that behind every avatar, every username, there's a real person with their own complex story. This deep dive ends not with a period, but with a question mark.
Ooh, I like that.
What will you take away from this? How will you engage differently?